Again, I find an appearance of impropriety.
Where would be the limiting principle? The district attorney signs every indictment assigned to this courtroom.
No,
Does that mean she's off every case?
No, it would be when the...
If I found that she's untruthful, is that what you're kind of suggesting?
Closing arguments were had in Fulton County and the hearing to see if FANI Willis would be disqualified from the Trump and his co-defendants' election interference case. Let me just tell you, I had to take a couple days to process. It was a lot to deal with, man. It was so much going on, from relationships and extramarital affairs and cash being thrown everywhere. Just the whole thing was just so full of drama and intrigue. But down to the closing arguments, I think Judge Scott McAfee is going to take 2 weeks and he's going to come back and then rule on whether or not FANI Willis and the Fulton County's DA's office can continue to prosecute this case. Honestly, there's so much that came up in this thing. One of the best things the defense did was bringing these things out to the public, because it gives us a chance to see the possibility of this conflict of interest, because that is what's at the core. Is there a conflict of interest, or was there a material gain on FANI Willis's part that should disqualify her and or Nathan Wade?
If Your Honor will remember, Exhibits 9, 11, and 12 dealt with the expenditures by Wade on trips. If you do the math on that, if you look at what he spent, and then you look at the testimony about what was paid back by Willis, because the cash reimbursement theory, I'll talk about in a second, but if you do the math on what he actually paid for and what they testified she paid back in cash, you still have over $9,200, $9,200 and $9,247 to be exact, is the amount of money they cannot account for in their testimony. And as Your Honor will remember, there was no mention of cash in Mr. Wade's affidavit. When the best and first opportunity to raise that issue would have come up is when the state filed their response in his affidavit. That is nowhere to be found in there. The first time we heard about cash was here in this courtroom.
You know, once we finally got past Terrence Bradley, the last witness, all we knew was that the next thing would be these closing arguments. And they did not disappoint. Ashley Merchant, who was so instrumental in getting Terrence Bradley to the stand and getting his text messages that, you know, gave us so much joy here online. She was present, but not actually making the closing argument. Her husband did. And I thought it was interesting because he stood by his woman. He did not allow FANI Willis to mischaracterize, what his wife was doing in cross-examination.
I'm going to leave for, I'll resist the temptation to defend my wife, and who I believe to be an excellent lawyer and a member of the bar for 20 years in good standing. But I will say this, Judge, you don't just evaluate the credibility of the witnesses, you evaluate the credibility of the lawyers. And Mr. Abadi stood up here in open court in front of national news and the national public and called her a liar. There's text messages that are now part of the record, which now are substantive evidence for you to consider, prove everything that she put in that motion, everything that she tried to elicit from Mr. Bradley was absolutely 100% true. And not only was it true, she verified through the witness himself that the motion was accurate before it was filed. So for the state to get up here and impugn her credibility, it's not only improper, it violates Berger versus the United States.
Because FANI Willis had it out for Ashley Merchant. I don't know if it was personal. I don't know if she knew Ashley. Because I think they talked about that she might have been a supporter at one point before. But the attorneys for Trump and some of his co-defendants, they accused Willis and Wade of lying on the stand, lying about when their relationship began. And they told Judge Scott McAfee, by keeping them on the case, it seeks to undermine the public's confidence. Adam Abadi accused the defense attorneys of pushing speculation and conjecture and trying to embarrass DA FANI Willis with questions that had nothing to do with the conflict of interest that is the core of this case.
Speculation, conjecture, things of that nature, assumptions are not enough for anything to arise to an actual conflict. And what I would submit to the court as well, that goes to the fact that what has to be shown is an actual conflict. If it's speculation.
Is there any qualifier there, though, that's in a post-conviction context?
Because, there were 2 points that were the core of this case. There was the conflict of interest or the appearance of a conflict of interest, and 2,
If a representative of the state, a lead prosecutor, the district attorney themselves, says something that's untruthful on the record, that is something that immediately has to be proactively policed by the trial court. Is basically what I'm getting at is, where in the law do we find the remedy to an untruthful statement? Generally, we send you down the street to the bar, right?
because what he's ruling on here has to do specifically with those 2 issues: conflict of interest or an appearance of a conflict of interest, and forensic misconduct. So that's pretty narrow. And that's what I was seeing in this, is that, as much as we've seen this, and, like I said, there could be severe ramifications down the line, because of perjury, if they want to pursue that. There's already been complaints to the bar. There's already been ethics inquiries into DA FANI Willis, which could be another way to get her off of this case entirely. Though Judge McAfee might rule in a specific way, the door is always open to appeal.
If the assigned prosecutor has acquired a personal interest or stake in the conviction, the trial court abuses its discretion in denying a motion to disqualify him, and the defendant is entitled to a new trial, even without a showing of prejudice. So that means if we show the court today, and I think we have through the proceedings today and before, that Ms. Willis has developed a very personal interest in this case, and Your Honor denies this motion, we're coming back all over again if the appellate court say you were wrong.
So why not just handle this while you have it now, reassign it, and allow it to go to another county where they can make a decision on if it rises to the level of an issue? Because, I've always made the argument that the things that they're accusing Donald Trump of doing as election interference, the phone call that they're talking about he had with the governor, these are regular things. This was nothing. This is what campaigns do to win. They reach out and they try to broker deals and people that they know that are in the state that could help them. Now, Trump has a very brash way of doing this. And so it can be interpreted, and most people have interpreted it as its most nefarious way. But I do believe that if you reach out to people to get votes, if you reach out to people to shore up a situation where you think you're in the lead, because that was the case when voting stopped, they thought they were in the lead, probably up 200,000 votes. And when they woke up after the water main break that they've always talked about in Fulton County, don't forget that, all the votes that were counted were for Biden, and they were down probably 13 or 14,000 votes. So it was a shock. So they were just like, wait, what's happening? What's going on here? There must be some foul play. And so the actions of some of the co-defendants, I don't think you can necessarily tie them back as a criminal organization, because remember, we're about to be in a RICO case if this goes forward. To tie them together as a criminal organization who are all taking orders from each other, and Donald Trump is at the head of this organization. Well, what if Donald Trump has no idea what's going on in Fulton County in particular? Of course, he's aware of things, but I would imagine if you're a president of the United States running for president, you don't have time to focus on what's happening in Georgia all the time. You can ask somebody, hey, how's it going in Georgia, until it becomes an issue, and then you have to step in and handle it yourself. So, the premise in itself, I think I think Donald Trump has a good chance of winning the case, whether Fani's on it or not. But the motivation for the case is part of the issue to me. It's like, why did you bring this case forward when these people were, we always hear politics is dirty, right? They were trying to win in the way that they knew how. So the fact that you're bringing this case up, it does become an impediment to him running for 2024, because like I said, they'd rather beat him in the courtroom than at the ballot box, right? As I don't think you've seen, but these numbers that are coming in for these caucuses are kind of crazy in favor of Donald Trump. So it comes to the point where if she's disqualified, if Fani Willis is disqualified, it puts us in one position. But even if the case goes on, it's a possibility that it will not be what they thought it was. I think he's been pretty balanced throughout. I mean, I don't think he's let his true intentions out. A lot of people were concerned about the fact that he was a supporter of Fani Willis in her bid for a DA, but politically that was the right thing to do for him as a Democrat in Georgia, right? So yeah, it's an interesting place to be. But I will say this. Though I might have seen most of this and say, yes, there is definitely a conflict of interest or an appearance of a conflict, or definitely an appearance of a conflict of interest. Forensic misconduct, it's kind of light. And the defense team really didn't focus on forensic misconduct probably as much as they should have. Depends on what you want to call forensic misconduct as it pertains to this case. So saying all that, if I'm Scott McAfee, I don't know if the defense has done their job to prove that Fani Willis was benefiting, that she got a material benefit or a monetary benefit from appointing Nathan Wade. I think that is there, but I don't think the defense necessarily proved that. And so it's going to be hard for him to make that leap. Anything's possible. Like I said, they've got a good chance on appeal that prolongs the thing. And, hey, it might push out till November, you know what I mean? So that the election happens regardless. I think the thing about this case is that they wanted it to happen quickly so they could get something and disqualify Donald Trump, which is unfair. But yeah, I think the defense had a burden that was not met entirely. And that's even with corruption, that's even with the relationships, that's even with banging in the back of Fanny's office. Banging in the back of Fanny's office, right? That's with 35 times. The cell phone data is pretty damning. It definitely gives a relationship that existed prior to 2019. But I think when it comes down to it, you have to come back to, is there appearance of conflict of interest? Is there forensic misconduct? Is that proven? And that's hard to say. So yeah, so I think that is where I'm at with it after a couple of days of processing, but it remains to be seen. I'm willing to be surprised, of course. We'll see how it turns out after 2 weeks and we get a ruling on this hearing and then the subsequent case, right? But anyway, let me know what you think about it in the comments. If you like this video, like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification for all uploads. If you want to watch more, please watch one of these videos down below.